Alright, we are recording for the prologue of Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, and, I have mixed feelings, mainly for one key reason, but I will acknowledge this, that setting that reason aside, I am feeling intrigued here. Despite how, because it's the same author as Final Frontier's novelization, which I very much did not like, so it's like that gave me cause for alarm. But this, it's like, okay, I'm feeling like this could work out. Need to keep reading and see, but it's like, okay, I'm not getting red flags here for main story stuff. But there's another thing that's just, I'm not even sure if I can put this on the author. It's just like, I don't care for the Kirk Carroll shit. I'm sorry. This is literally how it starts. Captain Kirk, the slight, anxious woman waiting at the door to Carol Marcus's hospital room, did not smile. It's a little bit of a introduction as to who this is, but I don't know if I can. Juan May Suarez? Suarez? Yeah, I think that would be it. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pronounce her name accurately. Fortunately, I don't think I need to very often. Yeah, so Kirk is here to see Carol. It's like, who else get this? He tried not to think that he had been. He tried not to think that he had been on Earth, on shore leave. The first leave in 6 years that they, meaning he and Carol, had not spent together. And also we get, besides, in a few months he'd be returning permanently to her. And this is all on the first page of it. And it's just like, what are you talking about? I mean, we do eventually get, this is approximately 11 years after everything, all the other movies except for the motion picture. Remember, the main body of events for Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock happen within like the same 2 or 3 weeks. Voyage Home, we get a time skip of 3 months after Search for Spock. And then Final Frontier is like 3 weeks after that. So that was all very condensed together. And this is saying, yeah, it's been about a decade. Well, it's been about 11 years. But, okay, so there's that. That's how 6 years together. But still, it's like, I already accepted from her behavior at the end of Search for Spock, but also during Voyage Home, that Kirk dodged a bullet. That's how I put it, with how she just was refusing to talk to Kirk. And it's like, initially some of it was okay, she's dedicated to the murdered teammates of hers from Genesis. She's going around personally escorting the bodies to their home worlds and can tell them about things. And she just somehow in transit never got any messages about David, got theirs, then got to Delta, is then told, and just stayed there for a while, but is refusing Kirk's calls. Okay, I can understand that. It's still not appropriate. Well, I mean, okay, for the first few weeks, I can understand that. But the implication in Voyage Home was, for those 3 months he was exiled on Vulcan, he was constantly trying to contact her, and she was constantly refusing. I get him wanting to connect with her, to talk to her. I get that. I fully do. But I'm sorry, it would have passed a point for me very quickly that's like, look, it's going to be I talk to her. I get through this stuff because I need to process David's death with her. But then I need to go. She has cut me out. I'm not interested in cutting myself in. Okay? Because also, don't forget, it's not like they had a true serious relationship. They had enough of something for David to be conceived, but then she actively chose to never tell Kirk about David and that they were father and son. And while her reason, I can understand, it still is she chose to cut me out of her life and his life. Could have had a relationship with him, great, but that should have been the focus. And so now it's like, oh yeah, they were able to reconcile. And we do eventually get some explanation, but still it's like, why are you throwing this at me? I'm sorry, she should be in the past for Kirk. She should be. And yeah, it just, I don't It just annoys me so much. Because I guess the way to put it is Carol's being treated very, very strongly as the one that got away from Kirk. And it's just, she didn't exactly get away. And I feel like we're just pushing it. We're just pushing. It's just being pushed that, oh, no, this is what should be. These two should be together. It's like, why? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not too happy that they had a bastard son together, for ethical, moral reasons. But that does happen. So it's like, have to move on from that. But it's like, that would have been hey, she got married at the time, but she chose not to. Can put that aside. It's like, why? It even points out later about that they were both so independent that that's part of the reason why. It's like, well, not exactly. I mean, you can have independent personalities that can still make it work. Carol actively chose to not make it work. And it just, I don't know if it is one of the authors here, that one of the people involved with the story, I should say, that was like, no, we have to get these two together. We have to have some reconciliation here. As opposed to just being, no, it failed. We can move on from that. If it was just, nope, we have to do it. Or if it is somebody actually thought this was good, because I don't feel like it's that good an idea. But it does help set up some stuff with David. Because, in fact, it sets up more than that. I'll get to it. Because in the movie, basically all we get for why Kirk would have a hatred for Klingons is they're murdering David. There's also, technically, we have the full history of the original series that he was a warrior fighting against the Klingon Empire. So there's also that aspect as well. This does put more on it and does renew why he would have a hatred for the Klingons. So I will grant that that's part of the whole. It is interesting. It's setting stuff up that I'm seeing potential here. Hopefully it gets paid off. I don't know if I can trust that. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was saying it in the Final Frontier videos as well, but I'm going to say it also here. Because, as I said, it really concerns me that that dude also did the Final Frontier novelization, and I did not like that. But film novelizations, you have to have some alignment with the movie such that you might be controlled, you might be curtailed as far as what you can and cannot do. Good example of that would be with Vonda McIntyre's Search for Spock novelization, where the first few chapters, which are not in the movie, I think are some of the best in the book, because she is free to explore the characters, including some that were set up. Like Book Saavik is wildly different from movie Saavik, and she's able to play with Book Saavik more, like do more interesting things with it being Book Saavik than movie Saavik in those chapters. Now later, in the chapters that are also in the movie, we are getting some more where it's like, okay, yes, Book Saavik is still here. It's like, yeah, so it is possible that because this is just a new novelization, and we have different people listed here, that J.M. Dillard is going to have more freedom here, might be able to tell a better story. I don't know. I hope that's the case, but anyway, I need to also check my notes. Okay, yeah, the whole thing with the timeline, a note about the timeline here, because 6 years that they hadn't had shore leave together. And I do point out, Final Frontier ended with him on shore leave, so, and she wasn't there, so that this is curious. But I do also put the note in there that I need the explanation here, because I don't like trying to make them a thing. I just, because it feels like it is that they're trying to make them a thing versus it being a thing. To put it in more modern terms, it feels like they're shipping them. They're not in because some of that shit's disgusting. Okay? It's like truly toxic. This, I'm not necessarily saying it's toxic, but it does kind of feel like, oh yeah, we want them together. It's like, but it doesn't make sense for them to be together. Well, they had a kid together. It's like, yes, but does it make sense for Kirk and Carol to be together? It's like, that is still a question there. So, okay, I have that there. Okay. So yeah, now I just Let me read this highlight. When he retired, Kirk, Carol said Marcus Labs could use his help. So now she's got her own lab. Could use his help, his skills, his diplomacy. He had begun to take comfort in the notion that when the Enterprise was no longer his, Carol would be waiting. They had quit blaming each other for being so much alike, so fiercely independent. They had quit blaming each other for a number of things, including the loss of their son. David's death should have driven them farther apart. Instead, it had brought them together. So, and we get that, and that's the highlight up here. The one lower down, that's where we actually start with the 10 years ago and getting the how they reconcile with each other, which even then is kind of incomplete. We mainly just get her side of it. We don't see his. That sounds weird. It'll make sense in a moment. But still is, I don't know. I feel like there's been a lot thrown at me. Well, okay, let me change that. I feel like a lot has been thrown at the reader. And as somebody who has been reading these novelizations back to back to back, and who, as I've already been blathering on, don't like the Kirk-Carol relationship as being, because it feels forced to me. That's largely it. It feels forced. That we're getting this stuff about how, oh, isn't it nice that they are together? Or, oh, yes, but this has happened where she's in the hospital. She's apparently seriously injured. We don't know fully. And it's like all this stuff. And how he's hoping that, when he retires, he'll be able to spend his retirement with her. It's like, we're getting all that. It's like, I don't like this relationship. I need you to explain to me why this relationship is happening. I need to know this. And it's just, it's taking so long. But I will grant, I'm not sure how you could, well, if it were more linear, that would do it. So instead of it being a modern day, then jumping back the decade to explain them, but if it were instead, because here, let me just read this. A decade earlier, Jim Kirk had stood in the corridor outside Carol Marx's townhouse in suburban Virginia and allowed himself only an instant's hesitation before pressing the buzzer. And it does go on to say that this is a year after David's death. And it was basically, he finally had shore leave, which he had already, and went to visit her house. Now, okay, to be fair though, maybe he'd done this previously, but she had stayed on Delta all that time. But now he does it, and there's even a comment that she is packing up, she's leaving. So if it was the day after, he would have missed her. But anyway. I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. Oh yeah, just, it could have started with that. That this is nearer to the end of Final Frontier, that he went and finally met her, and finally is getting to talk with her. I feel that you started there, so it's like, okay, you're giving me how they're reconciled. You're not just saying, hey, they are. In fact, they're doing great. Instead, you explain to me why, and then getting that. So it's that I could see maybe being a better way, but at the same time, however, because remember, I've read the full prologue. I'm just, so I know what follows from this. The key thing is her being in the hospital, actually. To be fair, that is the key thing to the prologue, because of why she's in the hospital. Excuse me. So, yeah. Yeah, so as I mentioned, she is packing up because she's moving out. Oh, and there's also Carol not answered the signal those times he had attempted to contact her when the Enterprise was within communication range of Earth. When did they have a not in communication range? I guess simultaneous simultaneous or synchronous communication. They wouldn't always achieve that, but yeah, and there is a mention of she had been getting his messages but had been refusing to read them. And there's another thing, but we'll get to that. I first want to read this highlight. Because he sees her there, she does let him in, and is in a resigned way where it's like, he's not going to give up. Just let him in. This woman was older, thinner, and shrouded in anger and grief. The way she is described, and that's just one example, I don't want to say it this way, and I'll explain why, but I'm going to say it this way first. It is showing Dillard is a good writer. The reason why I don't want to say that is I don't think Final Frontier was necessarily that well written. As I said, there are complicating factors that may have been causing that. So, and it's also could be the whole, hey, he wrote this later, he got more experience. So I don't want to just declare he is a good writer. I don't know yet. I need to read the whole of the book to really decide, or at least more of it than this. But the description of her with her anger and grief that is clearly still part of her. She is lingering within it, okay? And very much I chose to say within it, not with it, but within it. This is encompassing her, and you do get that feeling here, that she is in pain, but she is not trying to actually get out of it. And there's even a line a little later that does help show that. So he mentions about how it's like, why do you keep wanting to talk to me? Is her question. He's like, because I want you to know how he died. Klingons killed him. That's enough, isn't it? Jim didn't answer. Okay, brief aside. I don't know if anyone has ever... Well, true. I don't think anyone here is reading my books or reading the Substack articles, but something I learned many years ago. It's a style thing. So I just want to acknowledge it here. That you do not use contractions in the narrative portion here. So the Jim didn't answer, I would never write it that way, because I heard that style and it's like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. That when you are writing out, just the normal narrative, because in speech you can definitely use contractions, but when just writing out, no, you should not use contractions. That may have also been told to me in the context of writing for like more non-literary things, like writing news. But that is why, if you look at the Substack, I try to avoid using contractions at any point. And also, in any of my books, I try to avoid using contractions outside of speech. So I'm not holding against, it's just I see this here, because my brain was trying to translate it. It was correcting it to Jim did not answer from Jim didn't answer. I just want to acknowledge that. But yeah, so he doesn't answer. So now she continues talking. You sound so concerned about me. But if you really are, then why hasn't it occurred to you that I obviously don't care to see you again? What do you want from me after all this time, Jim? Forgiveness? Absolution? That's not what I came here for. Then tell me what you want. I wanted to tell you how David died. I do genuinely like how this, as I said, I can't... Hopefully he impresses me. Hopefully he does. I don't know yet, but I am happy so far. Because this is... Remember, this has been a year for her. And just, I do feel that this... I like this here. That, you sounded so concerned about me, but if you really are, then why hasn't it occurred to you that I obviously don't care to see you again? And it's just the whole pushing him away. And it reminds me back to Search for Spock. In one of the criticisms I had there, with the description of Peter Preston's father, which we're getting... I'm blanking on her name, and I wish I wasn't. His sister, who was by a different father than Peter was. But that she described that, oh yes, his father was so selfish because, our mother would just, lock herself in her workshop and wouldn't let anyone in. And it's like, doesn't want people in there, doesn't want to see people, but he would go in. It's like, that's not selfish, right, on his part. She was being selfish because it describes how she was in the workshop basically refusing to process anything, just cutting herself off from her family, cutting herself off from her daughter and from her brother, Scotty, because she's denying processing of Peter's death, or just doing it in a very slow but inappropriately private way. Because, there's private... I think it's more so denial that she was in. But as I said then, and I've said in other cases since then, that if I were Peter's dad in that situation, that was my wife, guess what? No, if I have to break the door down, well, maybe not be that violent, but it's like, no, I will be in that room. We don't need to talk. You don't even need to acknowledge my presence, but I'm going to be present because you are in pain. I'm in pain too, but you are in pain, and I will not allow you to be alone in your pain. Nothing active needs to be happening. I can be sat on the floor while you do whatever, but I am not leaving you because I am not leaving you in your pain. So for this, and she is trying to say, I want to be left alone in my pain. It's like her friend's responsibility, and Kirk's also, even though not exactly friend, is to do this, is to try to be there, is to not let her be alone in that pain, because it's turned her bitter. It's allowed her to perpetuate her anger and grief instead of resolving it. But also in this as well, what do you want from me after all this time, Jim? Forgiveness, absolution, and he doesn't want either, but there is also that aspect. And it is a little amusing, well, not amusing isn't the right word, coincidental, that a lot of people have been learning about, in a situation like this, what forgiveness means. So that kind of tells you, even though this is going to be a couple weeks, I think, before the video comes out, it's still, it's whatever the date is down there, it's like minus about 2 weeks. So it's closer to that event. And it's like because, wow, this is actually a week after. But anyway, the importance of forgiveness here. And she is not necessarily understanding that, but his presence is kind of forcing it. So he does talk about the whole he died protecting someone else, Lieutenant Savick, and Spock. I get focusing on Savick there, I do, but he did also die to protect Spock. Well, okay. No, I will correct that. In the movie, David died also to protect Spock. Like, he protected both of them. In the book, it is more clear that David was actively trying to protect Savick specifically. I think in the movie, maybe you do see that it is Savick that's about to be stabbed, but I feel it's possible David would have still turned even if it was Spock, or rather his body, that was going to be attacked. It's like, I don't feel it's necessarily just from the movie, he was protecting Savick. Feels protecting both, but definitely in the book, protecting Savick. But it still annoys me a little bit because of, hang on, She told me he died bravely, trying to save her life. It happened very quickly. And it's just, I want Savick to also talk with Carol. Because the implication here is she hasn't yet, but also Savick did send a message to Carol, likely describing some of this. Now, Carol refusing to read that, I can't understand. She wouldn't necessarily have the hatred, the false hatred. I don't think she actually hates Kirk, there's actually a line a little later that does explain that she does not actually hate Kirk. But it's like he is the point she can fixate on. Savick being part of Starfleet, and Carol not necessarily knowing that David and Savick, that there was something going on there. I can believe that she would just, because, it's Lieutenant Savick of Starfleet, I'm ignoring that as well. I can believe that, but it's still like, I loved book Savick. She was such a good character. I want her to also have some kind of resolution, some kind of reconciliation with Carol, and I doubt that's going to happen. Also, one other thing, my understanding is there had been thought that Valeris would actually be Savick returning. I hate that concept, because at least book Savick would never do that. Like, if she were involved in the conspiracy as Valeris was, it would be fully so that she could destroy the conspiracy herself. Okay, she would never support what was actually going on there. She would absolutely be double agent. So, very glad it turned out to be Valeris and not Savick. But that was close. I think it was, I am blanking on her name. Robin Curtis, I feel like? Was Savick in Search for Spock? And Voyage Home, technically, but, mainly Search for Spock. Yes, Robin Curtis. Um, I think I had seen or heard something that they were trying to get her back and would be in the Valeris role as Savick, but didn't work out. And it's like, good. It would have so hurt the books. Which I know, movies are primary, but still, consider the books. But yeah, so after, trying to save her life, it happened very quickly. Kind of sort of didn't, but go with it. At least in the book. Like in the movie, it was a ugh, and then he's gone. Not so much in the book, but still better ending in that book. He got such a better ending in that book. Anyway, Carol's face crumpled. She sank back into the chair and seemed to shrink, to be swallowed up by it. Jim went over to her and put a hand on her arm. She did not respond, but she did not draw away. So it is, as I said, she is within her anger, within her grief. And by Kirk finally being able to say this to her, which some of this she may have already known, but from third parties, from people that don't know her, that didn't know David, to whom this is just a message being delivered. So it had no emotional impact, but for Kirk to do it, for Kirk to be there and say it, that's what's finally dropping a line into that ocean of anger and able to pull her out. Well, if she chooses to pull, which she does. But I can't help you resolve whatever guilt or pain you still feel over David's death. Hell, I can't even resolve my own. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm so angry. I want to hurt someone. The Klingon who killed David, but he's not here. So I find the nearest substitute. She began to cry. They're animals. They have no respect for life. They murdered my son for the sheer sport of it, without a second's thought. Not entirely true, but going on. Jim gathered her into his arms. She held him fiercely and wept. I'm angry too, Jim murmured. He patted her back slowly, as one would comfort a child. Why? Carol moaned against his shoulder. Why would they kill David? Why? Obviously, I'm not reading it with the appropriate inflection, but I do like this. And this is, like the earlier part there, how she was talking about how I want to hurt someone. The Klingon who killed David, but he's not here, so I find the nearest substitute. That, and also, even continuing on, they're animals, they have no respect for life. That is part of why forgiving those who have hurt you, forgiving your enemies, is so important. Because it has poisoned her in this way, that she just wants to hurt someone. In this case, Kirk, who doesn't truly deserve it, and who's also in pain. And it's not allowing him to escape his pain and guilt either, even though he should have by now. But it's not completely, but he should have worked through a lot of it. Because as I've been saying with Scotty and with Peter's death, Scotty is a senior officer, as is Kirk. They have lost people. They need to know by this point how to get through those feelings. Family makes it different, but it's still, they should have been able to process it a great deal. Which is why it being Scotty's secret pain that Sybok uses so annoyed me. It's like, no, he had to be good. And also, I will argue this. That Scotty already showed that forgiveness. That she is now, that Carol's only now achieving. With Kirk here. Scotty already achieved that forgiveness because he forgave Granny back in Search for Spock. And I do believe that he could only forgive Granny if he had already forgiven himself. Or at least started that. Because there is also that aspect to this kind of forgiveness that it might not... You might recognize you need to do it, and you might be able to say it, but it might not be fully there. But it is that large first step on that path. It just might still take you a little bit to get all the way there. That large first step is that might be more than halfway there, halfway down that path. But she was refusing to take that. Scotty, the reason why I was saying that was just Scotty would have already had to have made that in just the days following Peter's death, because he had to forgive, because he forgave Granny. So it's like, yeah, that's, yeah. I know I'm kind of just rambling here, but Yeah, so it's the whole she wanted to hurt someone that she needed to learn to forgive, but also the animals, they have no respect for life. How she's degrading all Klingons as well because she is keeping the hatred. She's lingering within the hatred that she has, not just for the one Klingon or two Klingons involved in his death, the one who actually did kill him, but also Krug, who ordered it. It's like she's not just lingering, her hatred is not just them, but all Klingons. And this I do appreciate because of how it does remind us, even though Kirk should be through this, it is reminding us of the hatred that potentially Kirk does also hold, or at least the potential that it's all in there. He may process through a lot of it, but maybe the seed is still there. And we do get more later on that would make even more sense for why he freshly hates the Klingons. I'll get to it. But yeah, so she is finally, with Kirk there, is finally able to start letting go of the anger, start being able to forgive. Excuse me. Not necessarily the Klingons, but at least starting to forgive herself. And Kirk. Yeah, so I do like that. But one thing, I get why they're doing it this way. I wanted to tell you how he died. But I also wish that Kirk asked, because, like, why are you here? Because I want you to tell me about David. Because he only knew his son for like a week. That was it. And it's just like, that's kind of unfair to the man. Like, he potentially, if David hadn't been killed, would have potentially had years of getting to know the man, and also know him as a boy, learn some things from his past that now only Carol knows. And it just, I do feel like, and it isn't mentioned at any point here, that Kirk would have been asking those questions, so. And that too would have been a way for Carol to process David's death. This first makes sense, because this is like a breakthrough moment for her. So I'm fine with that, but I also want those questions being asked, because I feel Kirk should get those answers. One thing here that's just, it annoys me a little bit. So we're getting some explanation as to how Carol got injured from this Suarez, who was part of her team, and so was also injured, but the injury was far less severe. Yeah, the walls collapse on us, and I'm a little shaken. That's all. Jackson Dahl, our biologist. The way she said the name familiarly. There we go. Ways to get around a speech impediment. Then added the way she said the name familiarly, yet then added the gloss that let Kirk know the two were lovers. Really? I'm sorry, it just... Jackson Dahl, our biologist. It's like, you work with people, they're around you, they become your friends. Or at least they're acquainted with you enough that, yes, you use the first names. And then it's like, oh, you don't know who I'm talking about. When I say Jackson, I mean Jackson Dahl, a biologist. That's not to say you're in a romantic relationship. It's just to say you have a relationship. And because relationship covers a lot of things, romantic relationships, but also friendships and acquaintanceships. So I'm reading flat text. Maybe it was said with greater inflection to imply something, to imply more, to imply a romantic relationship. Fine, that's possible. But this is flat text. And I don't like this, because I just see it as Jackson Dahl. Oh, yeah, you don't know who I'm talking about, let me introduce him. It's like, that's how I read it, and then say, oh, yeah, they're lovers. How did we make this leap? It's just a thing I don't like. It's not a specific thing. It's just I don't like this because I find it annoying. It's like going back to the motion picture novelization where it seemed like, that the Enterprise had more action on it than the Love Boat. It's like, why are we doing this? How does this benefit the story at all? It doesn't. That's how. It doesn't. Mike's there. Anyway. So we get the explanation of what happened. That the planet they were on, deep within Federation space, but was attacked. The phase fire came out of nowhere. The vessels were outside the atmosphere then? Kirk was asking. No, firm shake of the head. It was so strange. Solar, Vulcan, who actually died from the attack, but did not die immediately, saw it with me and remarked on it. We could see the phaser fire very clearly. It seemed to originate below the clouds, as if the ship were simply invisible, as if the fire came out of nowhere. Jim nodded sympathetically while believing none of it. What Quan Mei was suggesting was entirely impossible. The Klingons did not possess a ship capable of firing while cloaked. And for that matter, neither did the Federation or the Romulans. After what she had been through, Jim could hardly fault her for an unreliable memory of the event. Okay, it's possible, though, that she saw the fire before, but, I mean, still. Multiple things here. One is, I just feel like point, neither did the Federation or the Romulans. This is suggesting that the Federation does, in fact, have cloaking devices. Which technically does make sense, because in the Enterprise Incident original series episode, they stole a cloaking device, so they would have been able to reverse engineer it and start applying it. Excuse me. It is established in TNG and in Deep Space Nine that the treaty that sees them not developing cloaking devices is with the Romulans specifically. Which is why, in Deep Space Nine, when the Defiant has a cloaking device, it is there on loan from the Romulan Empire, and that's why they have a Romulan on board to use it, at least for like one season, then that disappears and they just have a cloaking device. But it is also, so I'm just going to assume that everybody knows how the movie goes. It's plenty of spoilers here. So this is setting up something that I do find intriguing, very interesting, and also a little bit I knew about because we apparently have an abridged version of this on cassette, an audiobook version. Abridged because on a cassette, let me see, average you'd see 90 minutes to one side of the tape, so that's 180 minutes. And Kobo was actually predicting that it would be 6 hours to read this at the rate I go, but I'm not sure how much I trust its calculations on that. But in any case, my brother had listened to it and did mention the whole, when I said I'd be reading this, the whole, is that going to be in there that they were apparently using the prototype ship that can fire while cloaked, where they would have snuck it in around a planet that has shields, snuck it in so it's under the shields, and then they have another ship outside that fires a conventional shot that would stop at the shields, but then this one continues the fire down, so it looks like they have a way to shoot through the shields. So this would be like Run Silent, Run Deep, very good movie. Part of the reason why I grabbed it is because it is a good movie, and I do recommend people try to watch it. In that, and this is a major spoiler there, there's a Japanese battleship that people think is invincible. That it has racked up so many kills, but what is eventually discovered is no. Well, it may have scored a bunch of kills, but it also always had a submarine with it that would be like hidden underneath it, and that would also score kills. So, and because no one knew to expect a surprise torpedo barrage from a submarine there, they weren't able to counter it properly. And that's kind of what they're doing here. Is they have like the big battleship, but they also have the hidden ship that can also fire. So yeah, but it is still the whole, no, this is impossible. I do have the issue that because of how long it might be before Spock says that, well, no, we have to believe that it does exist. Why did somebody not come to this conclusion earlier? I do have an issue there. There's also another that I will get to in a little bit, but let me finish off more these last two highlights I have. Kudos, mispronouncing that, I'm sure, and Earth's governments were quick to claim that the depredation was directly linked to the Organians' recent disappearance that the Klingons clearly wished to provoke a war. So this is the second, where Carol was, Themis, is the second planet that has been attacked by the Klingons. First one was Kudao, Kudao. Look, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, even if I didn't have a speech impediment. I'm not certain. But it does describe here that they actually landed and massacred a bunch of the people there, and this is also deep within Federation space. But it does also mention here that Kirk, seeing the images, had found himself superimposing on them the face of Krug, the Klingon commander who had given the order to kill David. So this is helping set up, and I like this. I'm good with this. And this is part of the whole, I like how this has potential. I'm interested here, because it's setting up better why Kirk would have racist feelings towards Klingons currently. Excuse me. Because I do feel that Kirk would normally not feel a passionate and active racist hatred towards Klingons. So why then does he say and do some racist things in the course of the movie? Well, we do get the whole, he doesn't know if he can ever forgive them for the death of David, the death of his boy. There's that. But this is better setting up that it's far more recent memory for him as well, as far as people being killed by the Klingons and people that matter to him, Carol. It doesn't say here that she is killed, but that her injury was not just like burns on the side of her face, but it's also there was damage to her brainstem, such that she is on a ventilator. But they have been using drugs and cloned cells that might be able to get it to regrow, and so she'll be fine, maybe. But they don't know. It'll be days before, like even a week before they know if that takes. It's like, okay, we already have a reason for him to dislike Klingons, but it's been years, so is it really that strong in him anymore? Okay, no, we're reinforcing it because of Carol. And that's really, I think, the main reason this prologue exists, is to reinvigorate in him a hatred for Klingons, and make it at a personal level, not just a professional level, that they are my enemy, but on a personal level. And it is setting up that the prototype bird of prey has been at least tested prior to the events of the movie. That it is going around and is doing stuff. Now, there's also something else here that I am curious about. And that is, what does Gorkon know about this? So he is the Klingon High Chancellor. We haven't met him yet, but for how he is depicted in the movie, and I'm really looking forward to, I'm concerned still because of Final Frontier, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how the conspiracy is described here. I've said it before, I'll say it again, especially because now it's relevant. I do wonder if Kirk, to me it makes sense that the conspirators expected Kirk on the Enterprise to fight after Gorkon's assassination. They would fight, and that then the Enterprise would be destroyed by the combined forces of Kronos 1 and the Cloaked Bird of Prey. They expected that, and so could kill him, no witnesses. But that failed because he surrendered, and it's like, we can't just kill him now. So then they had to start improvising as they went. I think that is very reasonable, but it's also something that the book would be able to tell me, because we can get into the heads of the conspirators here. Can't do that in the movie. So we will see. I'm looking forward to that. But with Gorkon, I can believe, and apparently when the Klingon government was asked about these massacres, had basically said, those are renegades, those aren't us. But it's one of those things where it's like, nah, they might actually be you. I mean, it is a reasonable thing to suggest that it is actually the Klingon government. They're just doing it surreptitiously to poke and prod, gain information as to what Starfleet's response will be, and then they can actually launch a war with more information. But for the time being, can just lay low and see how things are going, without being fully committed. I'm just trying to think that in some ways, this is stuff that the Soviets did during the Cold War. I'm just trying to think, because there's a specific term for it, but I don't quite remember what it's called. Proxy war. That's it. Essentially, they're not. It's not a full-on proxy war, but it is like the initiation for a war. They're just testing things with a proxy, or at least something that they can blame on. No, it's just renegades, and therefore avoid culpability, even though they might actually be culpable. But I don't think Gorkin would go along with this. I genuinely don't believe that. That unless it is the destruction of praxis has that great an impact on him, I think it seems more reasonable that he was not aware of it, that he was not allowed to be aware of it, and is just doing his best to lead his people. With praxis, he sees it as okay, we cannot survive in this way. I need to change how the empire is functioning. We need peace with the Federation, like a formal, lasting peace. I think that makes more sense, and that this the prototype either has been a renegade project, or could be a special research kind of project, where Chang being, I think it does actually describe him as being the head of their military, where he is handling that stuff, but he never reports it to Gorkin. That's not known to him. Sort of like in real life, Truman not knowing about the atomic bomb, but Roosevelt did know. FDR did know. So it'd be kind of like that, but with FDR not knowing. Or using a movie as an example, Independence Day, where in that they had access to alien technology and been using it, which, by the way, I'll come back to that. But we're using that to like they were advancing things and all that, learning a bunch from the alien ship. But the president never knowing that, but his had been head of the CIA. What was his actual role? He wasn't VP. I don't think he was the vice president. I think he had a different role. But he knew. But the president didn't. I could believe it's more like that, where it's like, plausible deniability. But also, I think Gorkin would not allow the project to be tested in this way. I think he would have, because he would understand, I guess, a way to put it, I feel, for Gorkin, is war. If war with the Federation was necessary, he would fight it. But I think he would also be I am not going to provoke them to war like this. All right, that would be dishonorable. We can work on this, but we're testing it this way. We're never doing it that way. I would see Gorkin like that. So, but my guess is more so he had no knowledge of it, because it's also, it was part of his own assassination, and Ezed Bura, is that her name? The daughter? She, I don't think, was ever informed about it either. I mean, she couldn't be, because it'd be, the whole, we have a bird of prey that can fire while cloaked. She's either going to be like, kill the Federation with this, because she also needs to learn the forgiveness, like Carol is here. So is that, or she could be intelligent enough and be like, really? That is interesting. Yeah, how come I've not heard of this before? Well, it was General Chang's project. Chang's project, you say? Well, that's curious. Why is it that Chang, who has this technology, who I don't know where he was when my father was assassinated, who, and the Enterprise, they're saying that they didn't do this, and we did get some, in theory, they could have gotten records from the ships saying that, no, they did in fact fire those torpedoes. But it's also like, Chang was missing, and now he's the one prosecuting? I'm starting to doubt some of the stuff you're telling me. I mean, I don't... She could have been I think it's reasonable that she would be intelligent enough that with that piece of information, knowing that exists, might be you know what, I'm not necessarily sure I want to trust what's going on here. Or at least say, you know what, step back, there's already a lot going on, I'm now Chancellor, I gotta figure this out. But just one thing quickly, going back to Independence Day. Because there is a comment, I don't remember by who, in the movie when it's revealed that yes, we've had this the crashed alien ship for decades. That there's a comment like that's how semiconductor transistors were developed. That it and it does the timeline does seem a little suspicious, but it's not. That it was shortly after Roswell that the first semiconductor transistors were developed, or at least the first silicon ones. One problem is that it was like, yeah, we now have the ability to produce these things, to manufacture these things, and it was like months after Roswell. That technology is too advanced. You couldn't possibly, like, it was already being developed. It just happened to come out after Roswell, kind of thing. But there are some people that try to use that as, see, it was an alien ship, and we're getting all this technology from it. It's like, no, it's not. Anyway, I did look ahead a little bit. It looks like chapter 1. Well, chapter 1 does start with Sulu on the Excelsior. So it is set. It looks like chapter 1 is the start of the movie. It's gonna be interesting to see how that goes, because we'll be like Search for Spock, where the moment the movie kicks in, story gets contracted to just follow the movie. Don't know. We'll see. Will also be interesting to find out more about Sulu being Captain Sulu of the Excelsior, because of the, I still consider it nonsense, the whole thing starting with Search for Spock, that he was always supposed to be the captain of the Excelsior. So do we get a little bit of history there? Don't know. I'd also like some history on transwarp, because transwarp was never achieved. It is my recollection. It was never actually achieved. So in that way, the Excelsior was a failure. But it still, it's like it would be interesting to get more information here. Yeah, because transwarp, at least how it's described in some of the stuff, as I recall, was transwarp was supposed to allow them to achieve warp 10, which is supposed to be like infinite speed, but doing so in a different manner such that then it is possible to achieve. That did not happen. I am curious to see what the status of some of that is, because it could still be hey, it's a more efficient version of warp, so we're going to use it. Or maybe it's hey, it turns out it's not more efficient than warp, it doesn't hit our targets, so we're just going to use regular warp. I mean, I am curious. I like the technical stuff, I do. And Star Trek is science fiction. This is science fiction. So give me the technical stuff, not the stupid jargon type technical stuff, but just, you can give me the details. I want the details. All right. I knew this would be a long one, which in a way is also I know some of this was me just rambling, but it was also a fairly well-packed prologue. Not on the level of Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, though. And I guess also Voyage Home, but Vonda McGinter, oh my god. She did a great job of packing into, like, even single paragraphs, so much information. It very good there. This isn't quite in that level, but still, this first prologue, there's a lot in there. It doesn't feel dense, though. So yeah, it does not feel dense. It is, in that way, quite well written. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what comes next. I am intrigued. Hopefully, I really want to recommend this story. I really do. But it's Final Frontier, man. You really. All right. See you next time.